Girl Seabrook here. Just thought I'd pop on today because I wondered if any of you were having trouble doing some writing with your kids while at home during this social distancing. And it can be frustrating, I know, but I thought I would just quickly pop on here to just share some tips about writing because it does not have to be stressful at all. And the one thing I wanted to really stress, hi Melissa, is that especially for beginning writers, we don't need to worry quite as much about the spelling of words, but we just want to get it on the paper. But I just want to show you what beginning writing looks like. Even when your toddler does stuff like this, that's writing. That's them telling their story. That's them experimenting with pen and paper. We would never ask a student, or we would never ask our kids when they first, hi Janice, first learn to sit up, to expect them to walk. So expecting beginning writers to immediately get to something like this, where you have a picture and writing without going through the steps, is just not going to be fair to them because they're not quite ready yet, and it will be very stressful for anyone who's trying to do it. It's just like potty training. If they're not ready and we're trying to push them, it's not very fun. So I'm just going to give you some tips on how we can slowly get from that to something like this, where you got a little bit of drawing. You can kind of see it's representational, and it might have some letters on there. They might think they're starting to write a story. And then, you know, slowly moving up to something that might look like this, where you can start to see a picture, and then they might have a simple sentence at the top that you probably can't read, and that's okay. That's their writing, and they'll be proud of it. And then you're going to slowly get down where they're doing some writing and simple sentences, and how we're going to keep moving them along. Well, when they first start around me anyways, if I get them in my grade 1 class and they're still at basic, you know, sort of scribbly pictures, a lot of them will just use a couple colors. So I always start with big, bold, and bright is what I call it. And I always have the magic number 5. I always tell the kids 5 colors. So later on it's going to be 5 things in your picture, 5 letters, 5 words, that kind of thing. So we're slowly stretching them out. So that's the first thing they work on. And when they're good at that without you telling them, then you kind of push them along and you kind of say, okay, let's add more detail. Let's talk about your picture and what's happening. And they might say, I'm playing outside with my dog, but it's just them in the picture. And you could say, well, how do I know it's outside? What could you add? Oh, I could add some grass. Oh, well, let's add the grass. Where's the dog? Let's add the dog. So you start talking to them, and you're not telling them how to write, because if you tell them how to spell everything, or if you write it down for them to copy, we call that scribing. That's just like you doing up their coat for them. That's just like you doing up their shoes for them. If you keep doing that, they're not going to get better at it. So they're going to say, how do I spell that? How do I spell that? Can you write it down and I copy it? As easy as it would be to do that, try not to. Try to say, well, what sounds do you hear in the word? Write what you think. I call it kids spelling. And I always tell the kids, I want to see your writing, not my writing. So please don't try and stress about that. Tell them, just put down your writing. But anyways, we're going to then, after they're good with the colors, that's when we start making their picture tell a story. And, you know, you keep asking about those things. And that's when I would say, okay, 5 things in your picture. So that's where we're going to have the dog and the tree and whatever. And then they may not have a good grasp of the alphabet yet, depending on where your kids are. So you say, pretend you can write. Just add any letters to your page. And so this student knows his name, so he wrote his name in the picture. And that's okay, because that's letters. They're writing. They're putting some letters down. And so at the beginning, I always say 5 letters, anywhere. I don't care what letters they are, put them anywhere. And if they put their name, I'm like, yay, good for you. Because when they're comfortable doing that without me telling them, then I'm going to say, oh, what does a sun start with? What could you put beside the sun? And so then they're going to put an S, and we go through that. So now they've got these gorgeous pictures because they're becoming independent on each one of these stages before we move them to the next one. So now we're adding labels, we call it. So a flower. Oh, this is a picture of Abby. So she actually wrote her name there. So once they start having those labels that make sense, then you could say, let's add, can you add some more sounds? So if that's a sun, what would it end in? So you might just get beginning and end letters. And by this time, some kids might be wanting to write on the lines if they're in a journal. And that's okay. I just tell them to write their words on the line underneath. but I don't do it for them. I just say, what do you hear in sun? What do you hear? So they might have an S and an N, and yay, good for you. You just spelled the word sun. Rainbow, we're doing rainbows. So rainbow, you might have an R and a B, and that's awesome. If it's on their own, it's awesome. They're going to be so proud of themselves and see themselves as writers. But if you're doing it for them to copy, they're not going to be as good of writers, because they're always going to be waiting for you or someone to tell them how to spell, and they won't just be free with their writing because they're going to be afraid to make mistakes. So when they're really independent on that, I try and move them down to the lines, and I say, let's write a sentence. So what's happening in your picture? I'm playing with my dog. Okay, let's write that. I am playing with my dog. And just help them, just tell them, write it down. Please don't tell them how to spell it, because they're going to ask, but say, what sounds do you hear? I am playing with my dog. At the beginning, you might get an I, you might get an M, you might get a P and a G and D and a G. And it's going to be all squished together in one line, and you won't know that's what it says until they tell you. Yay, good for you. You just did your first sentence. When they're comfortable doing that without asking you about it, then you're going to say, let's try and get some finger spaces in your words. I am, so I finger space am. So you're just slowly pulling them along. When they're good at that, and then another thing we're going to do, if they have a P and an A and a G for playing, something like that, I might say, what other sound do you hear in playing? Playing. So I stretch it out, but not before they're ready. Not until they're independently writing a sentence down that's all squished together, or at least with the odd finger space. When they're doing that on their own, they're ready for the next step. They're ready to hear how to add more sounds. When they're really good at that, then I say, well, why don't you write some more? So add more to your writing. So I'm playing with my dog. Where are you playing with your dog? Are you playing with your dog in the yard? Are you playing with your dog at a dog park? Are you at the beach? Are you with your sister? So stretch it out. Tell me what you're doing. I am playing with my dog. My sister is out here too. We are having fun because it's a nice sunny day. You know, there's a simple writing. And they will do it, but they're going to ask you, how do I spell that? Use your kid's spelling. Do the best you can. And then, of course, yay when they're done. And you're just slowly pulling them along, just like when they're learning to walk. They don't sit up and walk. They get there and get there and get there, and you're always guiding them and guiding them and guiding them and pulling them a little bit, right? So you do the same thing in reading and writing, actually, and math, all that stuff. So eventually they're going to be quite confident writers, and they're going to be writing quite good little sentences on the lines. Then they're on their way, and you can then, when they start writing lots, I have some kids in my class writing quite a bit. So then I'm going to work on the punctuation, and I might say, well, you know, that's one of our sight words. Let's spell that right. You should know how to spell the, you should know how to spell C and like, and that kind of thing, but only when they're ready. I don't make them spell words right. I don't make them worry about letter reversals when they're beginning, because if they're always having to correct, they're not going to want to put very much on the page. So once they're really confident and they're starting to write on their own, then is when I really start to, let's flip our P's around. Let's, you know, flip our B's and D's, because that now says bog instead of dog, and that kind of thing, because they're ready now. They're confident in what they're doing. So hope that helps. If you have any questions, please, I could really go into this in more detail. I'm happy to give you more tips, you know, depending on where your child's writing is at. It doesn't need to be stressful. Just, I want it to be fun for them. I want them to see themselves as writers, and I don't want you pulling your hair out. So definitely, if this helped you a little bit, comment below. If you want more information, message me, because I'm really happy to chat with you about what we can do to get them to the next phase and make everything easier on you. So I hope that this was helpful, and I hope that you have a great day. Thanks for tuning in.